right, everybody, we're going to try take two. We're going to try this one more time. Welcome to Conversation with Mindsight, Mindset to Mindsight Maximizers. You're on with John Register, and I'm just going to jump into it right now because I was trying to do this before, and we did the whole thing, and everything just kind of froze up on us. I'm not sure what happened. So welcome to the show. I'm going to try to get the comments going here. It looks like we're now pushing out to all streams, so that is a good thing. And so let me just introduce you to our guest today, because you're going to love this individual. I just have been enthralled with him ever since we met. And so want to make sure that you understand who you have in the room with you, in the room where it happens. So he is passionate about helping organizations promote human development in a way that drives business growth. His coaching is fundamentally focused on bringing the best out of people by accelerating the development of individuals and their teams. His professional experience reflects his appreciation of diversity with clients from the middle market to family-owned / privately operated companies and Fortune 500 organizations. His primary areas of interest and expertise include executive assessment, leadership coaching, and hopefully say that right, development, as facilitating high performance teams to enhance collaboration and collective success. I met him when we were facilitating with a company called Experience to Lead, as we facilitated a program at the United States Olympic Training Center that was out in Chula Vista, California. He is definitely was a leader amongst the leaders out there. So please welcome the biker, the yoga master, the Lego builder, the partner advantage, Beau River in the house.
Hey, John, thank you for that warm introduction. And I should say, I don't know if I'm worthy of being on your show. I've got so much respect and admiration for the work you do, your story, and how you impact people's lives. So I'm just really honored to be here. And thank you for your service, both to our country and to people's growth, and in amputating their fears and going after their medals.
Hey, I appreciate that. I really do. Coming from you, that's a great compliment. Come from anybody, it's a compliment. so I thank you, and I thank you for gracing us with your time today. So I want to jump right in, because first of all, it's just absolutely great to see you. So I'm glad we can do this through Zoom, or through the platform, the StreamYard platform. So introduce us a little bit to the work that you're doing in promoting human development in ways that really drive business growth.
Well, thank you for that question. I mean, I think that statement alone would have sounded a little silly, probably like 5-10 years ago. And we're really at a new point, I think, in terms of applying the social sciences and psychology to businesses in ways that actually have tangible results, whether those results are financial or operational or efficiency or collaboration. We now have sort of a body of research and practical approaches to doing that, where we can say, hey, I can look at you in your eye and say, investing in your people, investing in their professional leadership, personal growth in your organization is going to actually make you more money. It's not just about the right thing to do. It's nice to invest in people. It's nice to have people growing. But fundamentally, I think the modern value proposition of leadership is that organizations, through their people, their leaders, are able to grow their workforces. And when that's happening, you can start to tick a lot of boxes. You can talk about engagement or employee experience. You can talk about culture, performance culture. You can talk about succession planning. If you have people growing and becoming better leaders themselves, you likely have leadership bench strength. You have more people in the organization who are ready to step into leadership, who step into responsibility. And ultimately, we know that one of the biggest sort of pitfalls of changing CEOs is when that doesn't go well, it impacts stock price and investor confidence. So really having deep succession planning, investing in leaders early, identifying talent early, positioning people for success, we can now say with a lot of confidence has some very significant business outcomes.
As you were saying that, a couple of thoughts were coming to my mind. One is my wife and I had the very fortunate privilege to visit the United Arab Emirates, and we met with Her Excellency Lady Shama, who's like the youth director of all the United Arab Emirates. Fascinating, brilliant young lady. And one of the things that she said was, in their whole business structure, they are grooming leaders, and they go down into the ones that are coming up and identify those that might run the company. It's not just one or two, it's like 3 to 5 people that they begin investing in. Dr. Harry Edwards says that in order to kind of have sustainable change, you have to have 3 things in place. One is a dependable and developed pipeline of talent. The second is a persistent and pervasive demand, somebody demanding where that talent that you have actually needs to go someplace. And then third, the institution that's being impressed upon to change actually has to want to change. In the model that you're kind of talking about, as you know, you're kind of that great lead into kind of human performance and how we're going to grow that. What do you see is the shift that's happening right now in the marketplace to make leaders really check all those boxes?
Wow, that's a big question, John. I'll start with our roots. We sort of shared our backgrounds when we first got to hang out at the Olympic Training Center, and then again with a shared client we did some work with. The fundamental question that we asked ourselves as athletes is, how do I get better each day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that question is a simple and obvious question for athletes. It's one that we have to ask ourselves if we want to get better and want to continue to sort of move from the high school level to the college level to the professional level, right? But I would say historically, it's not necessarily a question that organizations ask themselves in exploring how can they make their people better every day, right? And so, whether it's bringing in a lens like we have around performance through our athletic background, or resilience through your unbelievable experience and recovery and mind vision, Mindsight, warrioring, the sort of adaptation to that in a work sense, I think, is really, how are you helping leaders become great coaches?
Yeah.
And ask that question of themselves and of their teams and of their individual contributors every day. How can this person get better, and how can I help them? And I think, that question sort of, is very different than historical, now kind of outdated models of leadership that were more command and control, more hierarchical, more like directive or directorial, which it was really just about performance. Is this person meeting my expectation or not? And I think the new model shouldn't get rid of performance, but adding in this extra focus area of learning and development, and really emphasizing both of those areas. How is this person performing day to day? We need to know that, but how are they learning? And really understanding that, and understanding who is learning and who is the better learner, and how can we help people become better learners. Organizations that are thinking about those questions, I think, are probably light years ahead, right? Just out of the gate, because I think it comes back to what we knew as athletes, which was, you got to get better every day. You got to learn every day. You got to work on your skill set every day. Certainly the performance context of being at a track meet, or I played squash, like competing on a squash court, that will come. But the day in and day out of answering that question in new and more dynamic ways is really what's going to determine success.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking, and I'm going to get it wrong, because it's in my head, and I'm not sure I'm going to get the acronym right. But I think it's the VUCA model, the military model. Is that right?
VUCA in terms of disruption and change.
So they've been doing it for a long time, but disrupting, changing. And because I remember, in the movie We Were Soldiers, Now and Then, but with Mel Gibson, and that they were talking about the life expectancy of a second lieutenant who's dropped off into a hot landing zone where gunfire is going off, and what the life expectancy of that person, and it was like under 20 seconds. So you better have trained the person that's going to replace you, and the person needs to train that person, because if you don't, you're gonna have a real bad day, even though your people are dying in a bad day already. Less than 20 seconds. And so
Well,
I'm thinking about that in the terms of, if we're not training our leadership in that capacity to actually know what to do, we're really setting our whole companies up for failure.
Yeah, I've had sort of three career chapters. My first was I was a professional athlete. I played on the U.S. team. I played on the world tour, and I had this crazy idea I'd become a psychologist.
You got to tell the people what you played.
I played squash. I played, which is not professional farming. It's a racket sport where you hit a little ball against the wall. Not many in this country know about it.
Is that a sport?
It is a sport. Well,
or is that a vegetable? Or is it a fruit? We don't even know.
What broke my heart was, here I am. I played on the U.S. team. I was a fairly accomplished squash player. And the first time I got to a U.S. Olympic training center was with you in facilitating that work with that client. I was like, because it's not an Olympic sport, I never got to train at an Olympic training center, which sort of was ironic when we first met.
That's crazy.
But the second chapter of my career is I had this crazy idea. I wanted to become a clinical psychologist. And I went down that road as far as I could go. And I did, in clinical psychology, there's kind of a 2-year residency. And I did that at a combined VA Department of Defense hospital here on the north side of Chicago called Great Lakes Naval Center. Right before I got there, it became the James A. Lovell Federal Healthcare Center. And I had the privilege and honor of serving veterans and active duty service members. And boy, did I learn some important lessons about the stakes of war and the impacts of war on the human psyche and on leadership. And one of the things I took from that was, boy, when we're talking about organizational leadership, we're talking about a very different thing than the battlefield, right? And so I'm always a little wary of equating lessons learned on the battlefield or even in sport to the organizational setting, simply because they are not as zero sum, whether it's a person's life being lost, like you just talked about, or just the sort of zero sum nature of competition. It's like when I stepped into court, it was kind of gladiatorial. It's like two of us get in there and one of us come out winning and the other one doesn't, right?
Right.
And I think more often than not, effective performance in the organizational setting has more to do with co-creativity and how do I create a performance with my colleagues? How do I how do I become a world-class collaborator? What do I work on today to better organize and collaborate with my colleagues and become harder to compete with externally that way? But it's sort of removed from the performance context. And I think that's fundamentally the shift of leadership, right? I think leadership was seen as, hey, if we groom people with a lot of competitive driving behaviors, we're going to win in the market. And what we saw was, systems that failed because of people's egos commonly, right? Or self-serving behaviors, right? And so I think a lot of the shift, the philosophical shift in leadership has been certainly to think about, the depth chart, but like, what are we actually developing people for? Are we developing people who take the hill as first and foremost leadership instinct? Are we developing people who are looking to the left and right of them, thinking about what they need to be successful and who could step in if, the person in pole position moves up or out, right? And so it's a much less zero sum kind of encounter than war, sport, but certainly war. But the behaviors that come out of that context, I think, are what are now coming into view are much more collaborative in nature than competitive in nature. You can't lose that competitiveness, but if you don't have the collaboration, boy, followership, alignment, these sort of fundamental elements of organizational leadership really start to go down.
I like what you said around the co-creation. I totally agree with you on that. And so thanks I love how you're challenging back. So that's awesome. So we're talking with Beau Rivers. He's over at Advantage, and you're listening to Hurdlers of Adversity, conversation with Mindset to Mindset Maximizers. So what really prompted you to get into this work in the first place?
John, I wish I could tell you I had a plan. I just kept putting one. No, my key card kept working in various places where I was going. No, I'm kidding. So, I mean, as a squash player, I consumed sports psychology. I read some books. I worked with some psychologists. I thought it was just fascinating. Squash is it's a high tempo game. There's a lot of sort of strategy to the game, but it happens second to second, and sort of being fully present and learning how to bring a stellar psychological performance to the court is equally as important, if not more important, than your physical skills, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was that sort of background that just led me to one day be like, I think I want to be a psychologist. I think it's gonna be fun. and so I went off on the journey of becoming a clinical psychologist. And basically, as I walked that path, I realized that clinical psychology is very focused on half of the human psychological continuum. Mm-hmm. And that is generally the half that breaks, gets PTSD, gets depression, gets psychotic, and what the psychological sciences can do to avert those symptoms. And I read this really pivotal article, and basically what it said was remission of symptoms of mental illness did not equate to symptoms of mental flourishing increasing, right? This idea of like, if you're not sick, you're not necessarily well, you're just not sick, right? And framing this idea of symptoms of wellness, just like a symptom of mental illness takes time probably to develop. Sometimes they're biologically based, but oftentimes they're socially based. They're sort of experiences that were traumatic or challenging to process. They happened over time, and psychological symptoms came of them, right? Well, this article basically said symptoms of hedonia, which are engagement, development, mental flourishing, connection with others, having stable, meaningful relationships, being able to perform in your work life, etc. Those all happened like symptoms. They were deliberate, they were habitual, and they developed over time. So I'm thinking to myself, gosh, I'm being trained to just focus on this half. I don't know that I have many skills to help people with this other half. And so I just started sort of building my own curriculum. And anytime I had an opportunity to, study something related to a given topic in psychology, cognitive behavioral sciences, I would look at topics within that area that were related to this half about human wellness and flourishing and development. And that sort of culminated with a dissertation looking at performance in what was called flow, which is loosely defined as optimal human functioning in a given task.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was really cool. And so I kind of come out of my postdoc. I've got an offer to work in the VA. And I thought I'd just kind of look around at what people are doing in this space. And I got an opportunity to join a firm that sort of pioneered using the psychological sciences in businesses. And that was almost 10 years ago, and I did not look back. I felt some heartburn around not working with veterans because I felt a lot of passion for that, especially that was towards the end of the Iraq War. Yeah. And there was a lot of people coming back from the Middle East with PTSD, and I was trained. That was my kind of area of specialty in my postdoc. But I just felt like this work was calling to me, and I'm very happy to and feel really actually fortunate to get to work with leaders and have a bigger impact on their teams and their organizations, and helping them think about what do their people need to be great from their personal behavior.
Well, thanks for explaining that. I know my brother Mark is now he's a psychologist doc down in helping the VA in Jacksonville, Florida there, and so he's doing a lot of that work that you were just talking about on the clinical wonderful side of the work, and he's been doing it for a long time. So I want to move.
Hard work. It's
hard
work.
Yep. But he's doing well at it, so I'm really proud of him. So when you're talking about this, there had to be, I know that you say my key card kept working, so were there like what were kind of some of the tougher days that you had when you're trying to really explore this? Because I would imagine that most people are thinking about the clinical side, that's kind of where all this doctoral work and everything, and you're trying to do thesis upon thesis over there, but this may be not as explored as the other. Am I missing that, or were there some tough days to really kind of convince people of that work?
Well, I would say when I entered the field about 10 years ago, this was sort of early adopters and sort of people who were leaders, executives in organizations that were very serious about strategic HR, right?
Mhm.
Moving the HR function beyond its foundation and sort of meat and potato topics around, compensation and benefits, total rewards, right? Employment law, the sort of fundamentals of the function, but really thinking about how can HR evolve into a strategic lever for the organization. Historically, it really was less of a strategic level, more an important function, but served a more tactical function. And I say that with caveats. I mean, obviously, people are practicing the more traditional elements of HR, whether it be in recruitment or compensation and benefits. Like those are very needed elements of the business. But this sort of longer term, cultivating talent, growing teams, thinking about succession planning in more sophisticated ways. Those were like, hey, the people who were forward looking in HR and the more talent savvy CEOs were saying, we need to do that. But as a best practice across corporate America, even just 10, certainly 15 years ago, that was not the case, right? These were not sort of embedded functions back then. And so even just in my relatively short career in leadership advisory, I've seen a big change. I mean, it's gone from, sort of the early adopters, the forward thinkers to, I would say arguably if organizations aren't thinking about some of this stuff, they're gonna have to think about it. So one example would be an organization that didn't have these functions and is facing a large retirement population. Boomers are retiring from organizations at about 10,000 people a day. That's pre-pandemic data. Certainly that's probably changed, but we have a significant aging of the workforce. Also, Gen Xers, folks born between about 1965 and 1980, are a relatively small population. So we see folks sort of aging out and retiring in that sort of final third of their career. We also see millennial folks, Gen Y and Gen Z people coming into the workforce and getting put into big jobs 10 years earlier than they would in historical times, largely because of lots of retirement and because Gen X is smaller. So suddenly executives and boards are like looking at this data and seeing these trends. It's like, what are we gonna do? Like, do we have the pipeline? Do we have ready now leaders? Who's going to take over the business? Wow. Especially if they have various large scale business units where they have big P&L responsibilities. Those are big jobs. And so I've definitely consulted with clients who are sort of facing this reality and maybe not having the HR talent apparatus to deal with it. And that's sort of our sweet spot to come in and help with that.
So, in context, you're talking about what you kind of had to do in your shift, and now there's another kind of big shift that's kind of happening around just talent. Just take COVID, just for example, and folks are trying to work from home, and now returning to the workplace, and we've had positive steps and missteps on racial reckoning, and we got politics on the left and on the right, and it's like, what's happening here? Can you talk a little bit about culture as this big topic in executive selection and like onboarding? And culture can be influenced by bias, and how do you make leaders aware of their bias so that they can not kind of have the missteps in the Gen X's, Gen Zers, or millennials, and all this alphabet soup that's out there, as well as all the other affinity groups that are coming in.
Yeah, John. I mean, I think it would be obvious to say this last year has sort of changed the organizational landscape on many levels. I think on a human level, it's been a time of reckoning, and a time of reflection, and a time of sort of not being able to divert one's attention from the cultural and societal ills that are often, sort of overlooked, or on some level easy to ignore. They were not as easy. We were locked in our house, and we were seeing the murder of George Floyd, and we were feeling anxious about being disconnected from our social circles, and we were feeling concerned about our health, or our families or loved ones' health, and we were concerned about jobs and getting the biggest layoff in U.S. history. I mean, like, go down the list, right? It's like, boy, I think these have gotten everybody's attention collectively, and I think the question now is, what's going to be different, right? And my hope is a number of things, and I think one of the shifts regarding your question around culture and bias in organizations is, the number one work trend that we see, and this has been confirmed by research, is DEIJ, sort of the focus on making organizations more diverse, more inclusive, and safer for people to bring their whole selves. There's a myriad of reasons why one would do that. Decision makers would do that. The more heartfelt reason is it's the right thing to do. Maybe the more head level reason is it will make you more money. Because what we know about diversity in organizations is there's a myriad of positive benefits. Diverse teams navigate ambiguity better than homogeneous teams. They come up with more creative solutions. They're generally slower to norm, but have higher levels of performance over the long term. So I think organizations, for either one of those two primary reasons, either it's the right thing to do, or actually we now have the science to show that diverse organizations perform better, are increasing the level of seriousness that they pursue their DEIJ journeys. Does that mean that it has been solved? Absolutely not. But I think there is more intent, and it's a higher strategic priority, if not the highest, in many organizations. I'll pause there. It looks like you had a question.
Yeah, so thanks for recognizing that. I got a lot of thoughts going on in my head right now.
Go.
The first, that's the most visceral one right now, is that, yes, it's the right thing to do, but it's always been the right thing to do. And so what makes it different now, just because we're kind of woke or awakened to this, and the lag time of how we actually organically grow a really talented pipeline, kind of gets us to, okay, if this person is the right person for the job in the last 9 months, why weren't they the right person for the job 3 years ago? We're grooming them up, or they're coming through, but now we just recognize them. We're going to just put them in this role. That's what it looks like as the optics from the outside. So we still get misstatements, because I'm not necessarily sure if we have the new person that gets into the DE&I role, and I'm talking specifically African Americans now, if that is if that's not the kiss of death going up to the senior suite. Because I see a lot of offices aren't aligned with the senior suite. It's just kind of putting this person in here, and they're kind of off on the side, and everything now falls on them to kind of fix what was not right with the organization for the last 50 to 75, 100 years. Yeah. So that was kind of my question around there.
I think you're speaking truth and asking good questions, John. I too have had that question of, like, okay, is this company sort of putting a C-level diversity lead in the role to sort of be able to showcase that they're serious about it? Like, how serious is this agenda more broadly? What are they doing about it? What hard decisions are they making? You think about, what is one of the fundamental actions of leadership? It's to make difficult decisions, to prioritize and use resources. So it's like, does that chief diversity officer represent a broader set of difficult decisions that redistribute resources to create a more diverse and inclusive organization? That would be my question, right? I think that there's a couple ways to think about that. The more cynical one is maybe no, right? This is not moving the dial. I think if organizations really want to be sober about talent and culture, first off, talent exists on a normative curve wherever you go. So if organizations are overlooking talent based on their biases, that is only going to hurt them. So one of the fundamental things that we do is leadership assessment. We try and have validated approaches to better understand the talent, skills, and aptitude of leaders for specific roles, while clearing out some of the less robust means for evaluating leaders and how they fit, and increasing the validity and success of leadership selection. Number one. Number two, we're commonly asked, is this person going to fit in our culture, right? There can be some dog whistle there, right? Does this person act like me? Is sometimes code for do they look like me? They don't.
Right. Yep.
A lot of people we work with, they're perfectly wonderful people. They're not asking that question, but it's sort of embedded in the can they fit here, right? And this one opens up a lot of channels of conversation. I'd say first and foremost, does this organization have a clarified culture? We would say just because you think you have culture doesn't necessarily mean you have it, right? Think about the most tangible sorts of organizations where they sort of live and breathe the culture. Think Southwest Airlines, think NASA, think Apple. These are all places that have clarified what is our culture, what does that mean behaviorally, and what are the norms, the behavioral norms of our culture helping us to achieve or perform better. Culture is essentially a set of normative behaviors that should facilitate collective success. If you haven't clarified what your culture is, the behaviors associated with it, and how those behaviors are going to facilitate success, we would say you've got shelfware, you've got statements on a wall, you've got something that isn't actually clearly defined or of benefit to the organization. Once you do that, you've got a more objective stance to evaluate people's behavior against that cultural behavioral norms, right? Say, okay, well, we really value deliberation, consensus, and not being the first to market. We will be a slow third follower. Well, if you've got an executive who has only done startup work, who has moved at the speed of light in everything he or she has ever done, you could say, there's going to be some friction there. You're going to have to set some different expectations. And that kind of gets us away from, some of those dog whistle definitions. Let's just actually be clear behaviorally what we're talking about here. So stylistically, we don't get in the sort of rough place of saying, oh, well, this person's demonstrative and it doesn't fit with our culture, or, some other platitude that doesn't actually define a successful leader or a successful leadership culture.
Yeah, a lot of window dressing that can happen. I'm thinking about this in terms, I always try to take it outside of the kind of what people rarely talk about, and that's disability. And so we saw an Accenture report that came out in Q4, I think, of 2018, that was announced by Voya on the New York Stock Exchange. And the report that Accenture did said if you have two like companies, One company A, hires, retains, and promotes people with disabilities in the workplace. Company B does not. Of those two like companies, company A outperforms company B 2-1 to shareholder returns. And so what that caused was the comptroller of New York State, Mr. Tom DiNapoli. He says, okay, I got over $1 trillion in pension funds. I'm going to start investing my money, or the people's money, in company A versus company B. And you could have heard a pin drop in that room when he said that. And that's where I get back and I see that, I think in the D&I space, that role should align more closely with that C-suite, because the culture is driving the bottom line. If culture is driving the bottom line, and diversity, equity, inclusion, if we're more diverse, is driving the bottom line, then that's got to be part of the conversation, as let alone like a set aside for driving what widgets we're going to turn in the marketplace. So that's kind of how I've seen it, and I think that we are window dressing it when we just only align that's the group over here, and we're going to do the real work over here. Right.
Yeah. I think that's right. And I think that's ultimately the danger, that the DEIJ work happens in a silo, or it happens at a level, right? Sort of like, oh, we're bringing in more diverse entry level people. Look at our stats. But then ultimately those talented people come in the organization, they look up, and frankly, they likely see a bunch of elder white men, and they don't see anyone like themselves sort of in the future, or in the senior ranks of the organization, or hypothetically their future. And I think that sends a louder signal to staff.
Yeah, there's a great group. I've been fortunate enough there's a startup out of Dallas, two amazing women that have started this kind of, it's an online kind of portal that allows, it's like Uber meets the HR world, right? So you know how you can rate your driver on Uber, and your Uber driver can rate you. So they've done the same thing in the HR space. So it's all digital platform. And so you can say, hey, I'm with, this one company, and do I feel that I feel like I have a sense of belonging here? Basically those type of questions that are on. I think it's a really great kind of place to start with that, because I don't know if companies really, if they really want to do the work, there's probably a lot of Band-Aid pulling off of to really get to the real numbers, and then publish those numbers to say that we're going to hold ourselves accountable, and we will change our culture to this. You will hold by this standard, and if not, you're just not the right fit for our group, our company. And that's the harder thing, because you may have somebody that's really talented and they just don't agree with it, and you may lose that talent. But if that's the cultural shift that you are willing to go down, I think that's the appropriate thing to do. Because like at the end of the day, you said, we're going to be more nimble. We're going to be faster. It'll take longer time to get there, but we will outdistance the competition, because we will be a more efficient. And I will understand more about the roles and responsibilities of all the people that are around me, what they bring to the table. So fascinating conversation. Anything else I may have left off in that?
Well, gosh, we could keep going for a long time. I mean, this is a deep topic, and I think that the story is not fully written yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this is a journey, and ultimately, I think as a white male, the moments that I have had the most insight into how a diverse range of people experience an organization, experience culture, have been messy. This work is emotional. It isn't doesn't always feel safe to have these conversations on various sides, right? It's charged on multiple sides. So I think that is also where the progress happens, when you're having real talk and you're really talking about people's experience of like, how do I feel like I can't bring my whole self to work? Or how do I feel like I'm going to be seen if I'm outspoken and challenging a bogus perspective that somebody else has? Like, am I hurting my career? And how does that lead to, like all of these conversations, they're very needed, but I think there's a lot of emotional energy around them, and there's a lot of perceived risk. So it takes good facilitation, it takes bravery, and I think that's where we're headed. That organizations can have more real conversations and really understand how people are feeling. Sort of the difference between employee engagement and employee experience.
Yeah.
You can imagine someone being totally engaged, performing well, and having a terrible experience because they don't feel like they can bring their whole selves to work. I think one outcome of the last year is organizations are focusing in more on what is this employee's experience? What is this person feeling about our culture, our space, our team, their leader? Sort of the optics of our organization and the diversity in our organization.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think also there's a kind of a flip to it as well, right? Because what's this team member feeling? The way I'm feeling about this team member right now is probably the same way. I don't want to have this conversation. I'm guarding my words. It's probably the exact same way that person has been feeling their entire career of guarding, right? And so now they're on the flip side, and this is difficult. This is uncomfortable. And that's exactly the point. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. This is what I've been feeling all along.
This is what I've been feeling. So,
totally.
bark up another tree. I think, one of the things that I've been hearing of late, this has kind of come up a couple things I've had, is if executives now are really struggling and saying that, this conversation's too hard. It's too much. It's too more than Who Moved My Cheese. It's too much more than the, what's that book? I think it's Who Moved My Cheese, like the 1 minute books, right? The 1 minute reprimand, the 1 minute manager, all those things. If it's too much for me to have these difficult conversations, maybe I'm just not the right leader anymore.
It's a big. Let's hope there's people out there asking themselves that question. I think that is a gut level question that I think is important for leaders to answer. I mean, if you look at the evolutionary reason for leadership, it's that our ancestors, millennia ago, realized we're a little bit safer in groups than we are individually. And lo and behold, sort of over various eons of evolution, that sort of shaped our language skills, our collaboration skills, our brains, our neural development, right? And fundamentally, in social systems, you need someone to dictate action that serves the group, right? So the question I regularly ask executives is, why should someone follow you? What's in it for them? Beyond, your stripes or your title or why should people follow you? Why would people follow you? And I think, being able to facilitate those hard conversations, being able to create more alignment around a task rather than relationship conflict, being able to develop people, these are the fundamental sort of value propositions of the modern leader. Certainly you got to still achieve results, but I think, it's like my coach once said to me on a squash court, hitting a squash ball is relatively easy. It's like this that gets in the way. It's like, certainly business is vastly complex, but sometimes it isn't, right? It's like we get in the way of it. Humans are gunking up the system.
It's not that hard. So I won't go. There's another thing I was going to go, but I'm not going to go there on this one. I want to jump now into what my favorite part of this whole thing. I don't know where everybody is. I like seeing the zero on this live, and I know there are people out there because I know they're listening. I get the report afterwards, and they're like everybody's, but no one's jumping in the conversation.
It's worth it. I'm enjoying time.
Oh my gosh,
John.
this is gold. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Beau River, a partner over at Vantage, and he's in the Chicagoland area. Of course, West Side is my side, Oak Park, Illinois. I put up the clubs for that. And you're listening to Hurdlers of Adversity, conversations with Mindset and Mindsight Maximizers. And so we're into the JR Power 5 rapid fire questions. We're going to put them up close and personal now for the 5. And you get a chance to ask me 5 if you so choose. You want to do that as well. So they're real simple. Don't worry about it. You don't have to sweat. Don't break the sweat. We're not playing squash. All right. Okay. So here we go. Skydiving or bungee jumping?
Skydiving.
Plain M&Ms or peanuts?
M&Ms, just because I like peanut M&Ms.
It doesn't matter. Just blowing my mouth. What you have for breakfast this morning? Don't say M&Ms.
I'm interval fasting, John, so I didn't have breakfast.
Gosh. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. It is not the most important breakfast day of the day for Beau right now. Yeah, animation or cartoons?
Probably animation. I mean, yeah, animation.
Animation.
I like when sort of like weird things happen in animation. I think those are fun shows.
The Incredibles is my favorite of all time. What do you explain, how do you explain your job, your role, what you do to an 8-year-old?
I help people be better.
Awesome. All right, you got 5 for me. I'll go real quick if you got them off the top of your head, or
okay,
ask at random.
What's the one skill you have developed in the last year that made you a better keynote speaker?
Listening.
What is one skill you've developed in the last year that made you a better collaborator?
I would say the same thing. Well, let me think about that a little more.
You say something different.
It's really around what do you call masterminding.
Say more.
So formulating mastermind groups.
Mastermind groups. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you hopeful for the future, and why?
100% hopeful for the future. The reason is because everything evolves. I believe in that I don't know if they knew what they were doing when they wrote the Olympic model, the founders of the modern day Olympics of Citius, Altius, Fortius, which has been inspiring Olympians and Paralympians since 776 BC, which means swifter, higher, stronger. And those words are not written in the superlative of the word. It's not swiftest, highest, or strongest. But because they have this ER stem ending, we can be the swiftest today, but swifter tomorrow. We can jump the highest today, jump higher tomorrow, and we can lift the heaviest weight today, lift heavier weight tomorrow. So I believe we can have that ER stem ending for every single situation that we have in life.
Maybe we should just leave it there. I love that. I've heard I think you shared with me when we were at the Olympic Training Center that moniker, but I loved hearing it again.
Yeah, that's when I talk championship. That's how I grew from mindset to mindsight. This wasn't something that I picked up just like over.
Oh yeah, set is static.
Static, right? We're here. We're at a level. Right, we're the best. How do we get better? We have to have another vision. We have to have vision out there. So mindsight, yeah.
Love it, love it.
So awesome. Okay, North Star. What's your guiding North Star? Your guiding principle when things go to crap? What do you hold on to as an anchor?
Serve people.
Serve people. Love it. Love it. And then finally, how do people connect with you? Because you have, just a lot going on. You talk a little about Vantage, because I've mentioned them, but I wanted you to shout them out.
Partner. I love our firm. Vantage Leadership Consulting has been around for about 45 years, and we've always been in the business of identifying and accelerating the development of talent. That has been our work. We are a Chicago-based firm. Our primary footprint is North America, but we operate globally, especially now over this. We're going to be in Singapore in 5 minutes. We want to be. but we're primarily focused on North American clients and serving their global leadership needs. Our sort of base work is in primarily service areas are executive assessment, assessing leaders for roles, and helping hiring executives identify the best leader for a given role to lead a given team, executive coaching, and also just leadership coaching, working with high potential aspiring leaders and more seasoned executives to help them continue to develop and enhance their leadership capabilities. And we also have heavy practice around team development, working with executive level teams, helping them operate, clarify agenda, get what we call a team compact. How is this team really going to fundamentally engage and support one another? And we also are doing a lot more leadership development programming. This is sort of the hot thing in our field right now. Leaders sort of need to sort of retool in many of the ways we've talked about over the last hour, right? It's sort of a brave new world in terms of organizations and social climate, and helping leaders from, emerging leaders at the sort of director level in organizations to senior executives really think about these issues, think about what the science tells us about what leaders should be doing to better lead organizations, and ultimately helping them translate that science and the research into their reality. How many of us have been to a cool talk and heard some ideas and think, oh, Beau was an interesting guy to listen to. I kind of remember him, but I have no idea what he talked about, 6 months later. So we give a lot of thought to how do we distill and translate the best practices into a set of behaviors and approaches that are sticky and become habits that leaders can use in their context.
Awesome. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with you today, as always.
So good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. And next time I'm in Chi-Town, I have to look you up because I kind of pretty frequently visiting my mom and dad. But I just want to say thank you again for gracing us and being on this show today. And we'll get you the recording that comes up from it, because I think we have some great golden nuggets that are out there, and want to make sure that our listening audience gets a chance to hear those again in the context that you presented them. So I appreciate you, and you can stay on for a second. I'm going to wrap the show up, and so thanks again.
I appreciate you, John. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is Beau River. Wow, we had a great conversation today. And so here's the kind of outro for you real quick. I'm going to go down and dirty on it. We have KPPF. I got a new podcast on Podbean. It's called Tactical Advantage. I opened my mouth for the southeast part of Colorado Springs, and so they gave me a radio show. So we're talking about stuff. And after 4 shows, the mayor came on. Well, I'm like, whoa, okay, Mayor Colorado Springs, we got him on the show. And that's on this weekend. So Memorial Day is coming up this weekend as well. So buy the book, 10 Power Stories to Impact Any Leader. It's still out on Kindle. So it's like only $2. Go get it. It's easy read, and it's a journal, right? So you can journal your way through to leadership success. So it's actually action steps like Beau was talking about. So it's just not my stories. It's actually your stories. So you can be a better effective leader with your stories, not my stories. All right. Anais Nin says this, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. Be blossomers out there. Take the risk. And I say, when truth outweighs fear, we commit to a courageous life. Next week's guest is Olympian Mariah Koroleva. We got to have her on. Follow her now and learn about her to ask questions. Ask her questions next week. Now remember that you are the inspirations. Inspirations lead on to motivation. Motivation in turn causes actions. Actions lead us to transformation results. And those results re-inspire us or allow somebody else that's watching the process to catch the vision. We'll see you back here next week on Hurdlers of Adversity. And we're having these Mindsight warriors on. So we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.